Hi guys, so today I'm going to do my December wrap up. Happy New Year! It is the very first day of 20 and let's start it off with the first book I read this month. At the beginning of the month I didn't get a whole lot of reading done. I had exams going on, so I never got a whole lot of reading done. But I started Gathering Blue by Lois Lowry. This book was very good. I read Giver back in high school and I absolutely adored it. So I borrowed this book off a friend and I read it at the beginning of the month and it was so good. I'm not a fan of the ending, I will say that. But other than the ending, this book was actually really good. It was a quick read. It took me a little while because I had a lot of studying to do. But I gave this book a 5 out of 5. Then we had the Christmas book-tube-a-thon, which I was a part of, and I managed to get 2.5 books read out of during that. The first book I read was Ruby Red. This book is a book about a girl who has a time-traveling gene in her family, and she grew up thinking that it was going to be her cousin that had it, but it turns out that she's the one that has it. And she ends up having to go back in time and try and get the blood of all the other people who also have this time traveling gene, so she can put it in this machine called a chronograph? I can't remember exactly what it's called. But it was a really good book. It took me pretty much a day to read it, so I'd say probably like a couple sittings. It's a fairly short book. And it's very fast paced. It was very much enjoyable. I absolutely loved it. I gave this book a 5 out of 5. The next book that I read during the Christmas book-tube-a-thon was the second book in the Ruby Red or Precious Stones trilogy, and that is Sapphire Blue. This book was exceptionally good as well. Actually, I would probably say I liked it more than Ruby Red. We start back into right where we left off in the first one. There's like no time difference. It's like bang, bang, bang. And in this one, there's some stuff going on. She finds out some things. We're introduced to a couple new characters. It's a very good read. I don't want to give away too much, but it's a very good read, and I give this one 5 out of 5. The third book that I started reading during book-tube-a-thon is Mind Games by Kiersten White. I actually didn't get this book finished, as you can see, and I'm actually not planning on finishing this book, so we're just going to remove that. This book is boring. I don't even want to force myself to finish it. I'm not a fan of not finishing books. I usually try to finish all the books in the series, but I just can't get into the plot. It's very confusing where they're bouncing around so often, going from the past to the present, and there's no time travel in this one, so we're just sort of like they're giving us like information that I don't think we necessarily need. And it's just confusing to figure out, okay, what's going on and when, and I just don't like it, so I don't plan on finishing this book. I give it 1 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read, I don't have a physical copy. I read it on my Kobo, and that is Divergent, the first book in the Divergent series. I read this book before when it first came out, and I absolutely loved it. It's about a girl who lives in a dystopian version of Chicago, I believe it is. And she's in this world. They have different factions, and the factions are based on personality, and she's in the abnegation faction, which is all about selflessness and putting others before yourself. So the book starts off on the day where they choose where they go, and they get tested for which faction that they best work with. Sometimes you get the same one that you grew up in, sometimes you don't. In the case of Beatrice Pryor, she gets 3 factions that she is able to, which is unheard of. Like, nobody has ever gotten 3 factions. And because of this, she's labeled Divergent. Now she has to keep it a secret. She can't tell anybody. Like, this is not a good thing that she's been labeled this. So it's interesting how everything turns out in the end of the book, the first book. The next book that I read was the final book in the Ruby Red Precious Stones trilogy, and that is Emerald Green. This book was fantastic. It was a bit slow at times, but it was good. It wasn't as good as the second book. I will give it that, but then again, it is a final book, and final books tend to disappoint us sometimes. But I absolutely loved how this ended. I didn't even know, like, I never even suspected what happened in the end would happen. I had an idea, but I didn't expect it. So it was nice to be surprised for once about the ending. I absolutely loved the ending. I found it was closure. It was good closure for it, and I gave this book 5 out of 5. The final book that I read in December and in the year 2013 was the second book, the Divergent trilogy, and that is Insurgent. Insurgent wasn't as good as Divergent. It was long. It was kind of boring at times, but then there'd be points in it where, like, I'd get, like, really bored, and I'd be like, okay, I'll finish this chapter, and then I'll put the book down for a while. And then I would finish the chapter and be like, holy shit, I need to keep going. Like, that's just the way it is. Like, after so long of a little bit of boringness, there was a peak. And we'd have, like, a bunch of these little peaks. And then the ending, holy smokes, that ending. I did not expect that ending to that book. The ending makes the whole book. And I'm really excited to read Allegiant this month. So comment down below and tell me what you read in December and what you're planning on reading in January. Bye!